Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Neil Schaefer. Welcome to another exciting episode of Maximize Your Social. Today, this podcast, this live stream, depending on how you're consuming this content, is going to be all about from marketer to influencer to author, how to climb your way up the influencer pyramid by becoming a published author. I'm really excited for this episode. I get to introduce I won't say a business partner, but he almost feels like it with how much he's helped me and my upcoming book, which we're going to talk about later in this episode as well. The one and only Lee Constantine from Publishizer. Lee, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, Neil, thanks for having me. Really glad that you could have me on. Super excited for it.
So, Lee, how would you describe Publishizer? I know you reached out to me for the first time, it was probably October of 2017. So we've known each other more than a year and a half now. But how do you describe Publishizer to those that don't know anything about it?
So Publishizer, we've evolved quite a bit over the past few years, but Publishizer, I think the best way to describe us is a literary agency that specializes in pre-order campaigns. We like to say crowdfunding literary agency. But yeah, we're specialized in getting authors book deals. A lot of commercial nonfiction, fiction, YA, like it really spans across the board, but we're really pretty strong in topics like yours, business, influence, commercial nonfiction.
So just to get back to that point, so a literary agency, I think there's a lot of people that are listening that let's take a step back, right? And it's funny because I describe a Publishizer differently, as you can imagine, not being the CEO and founder or head of growth and founder. So let's take a step back and then we'll get into sort of how Publishizer works. I know a lot of people are very curious, but let's take a step back into, book writing. And we both agree that every professional, we always say, hey, everybody has a good book in them to write, right? Based on their own experiences. And I think we're getting to the point now with, personal branding, the democratization of influence, that really every professional should write a book. And I think we both agree about that. But, what's your take on that, Lee? Why do you think everybody listening here should go out and maybe sign up to Publishizer with a book idea and sort of test the waters?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I mean, there are many reasons why, a professional should write a book, right? And I'll give the big ones. I mean, number one, a book really helps you spread your message. I mean, as a professional that wants to become an expert or you're becoming an expert, experts typically have unique methodologies and formulas or really unique insights, that allow them and others to achieve success. So putting this in book form is a really credible medium to spread that message further, right? That's probably the first and most important. The second one I typically say is credibility. A book does help establish you as a thought leader or an influencer or however you want to describe that, especially a really good book. So a really good book that people love reading, they want to share with others. It does a lot of things to establish you and your brand as a thought leader, and it makes people want more of what you have to say. So, you could say, Neil, that maybe this is the beginnings of influence, or this is influence, but this stuff becomes more difficult to obtain without that credibility. Third thing is, it's really a step towards building your career or your personal brand, I would say, as an author. And most influencers are also authors. So a book is not a means to an end. It's a stepping stone to some bigger things. Maybe you have many book ideas and this is your first book and you're establishing yourself, you're getting readership, or you're becoming a speaker and you want to increase your speaking fear or whatever it is. A book really allows you to do that.
Lee, those are all great answers. I guess from my perspective and experience, I think of a book as a business card. So, if you have aspirations, if you want to, if there are places you want to go with your career, with your life, I think that book is going to be the best way to help you get there. And I think what a lot of people forget about is when you write a book, it's really the process that generates a lot of great things for people. So, do you have the passion to write a book about a subject that you think you're an expert on, or something that you want to become an expert on? And I think just going through that process, you're going to realize gaps in your understanding, potentially. In the process, you might have the ability to do some research that you might not have thought of doing before. You're going to cover insight. You may want to reach out to experts, and it gives you a reason to reach out to experts and actually engage with them. And at the end of the day, as you start telling people that you are writing a book, it leads to further engagement from your community and maybe from people at work. So I really do think it's an amazing vehicle. Obviously, at the end of the day, you'll have an achievement, which is a published book, which is going to stay with your professional brand forever. So, I know that a lot of people listening to this, if you are a solopreneur, it's a no-brainer because it is that business card. If you own your own business, small business owner, what have you, it's a no-brainer because it's a business card. But even if you don't, there are enough reasons to have it to really differentiate yourself in the market and make yourself an entity that people want to work with, want to hire, want to do business with, that'll last throughout your entire career. So I can't speak, I can't speak highly enough about it. I started writing books. My first book I wrote back in 2009 when self-publishing was very, very early on. And I wrote it because I was in transition and I'd already started blogging. So why not put it in a book format, get it out there in the world? And it's so easy to do now, right? And that's where Publishizer, and let's put that URL out there again, that's where Publishizer really helped me in that. This obviously is 10 years later, but if you're a first-time author or first-time book writer, just the exposure you get to all sorts of different people that can help you along that journey was pretty incredible. So yeah, at this point, really, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably already thinking about writing a book. And my job, and I would assume Lee as well, is really to get you to that stage where put it in an idea, put it in a plan, and at least get it up there and Publishizer and test market. And that's exactly what I did. And we're sort of jumping ahead to what we wanted to talk about later on. So let's take a step back now, Lee. So, we talked about why everybody should consider writing a book. A lot of people listening to this podcast want to become more influential in what they do. And I think all of us would rather carry more influence than less influence. So how, as an author, as you start writing the book, even if it's not published, how do you think, and why do you think authors begin to yield that influence?
Yeah, I think this is actually a pretty nice segue into what you were mentioning earlier about, there's a lot of ways, first of all, but like you said, Neil, like when we started writing this proposal, it really makes you hone your message and what really is this idea, right? Because you could be writing pieces of content, you can be blogging, you can be on podcasts, you can be doing a lot of things that don't necessarily bring you traction or awareness or thought leadership or even help build influence, right? So one is when you start writing this book proposal, like you mentioned before, it really forces you to bring the book from an idea into something that's really tangible, into something that, okay, makes a lot of sense. Who is the book for? What other books are out there are like this? Are they complementary? Are they competing? How do you position this? Where is this going to fall? How are readers going to take this? And like, really, why do you as an author make this unique? So that applying to a book is super important. And then the writing process is another step that you take. And that really falls in line with how you start yielding this influence as an author, right? Because, Neil, like once you have something that, people want more from, once people want to hear what you have to say, that's when you start developing an influence. So you know exactly the value that you can bring to the table. And once you have that as an idea, there are so many ways that you can basically start yielding influence. But there are like very few surefire ways, right? I mean, you could be great at, like as an author, you could be great at book tours and you can command an audience and sell tons of books, but that's really difficult. And a lot of people don't do that well. But what does work well in the book phase is, at least in my experience, is one, it's a really great book. So if it's well edited, it's very marketable, and it's usually backed by a publisher that can help you get it out there. Once you have these things in place, you basically have to be able to promote that message, sell the book, and actively building your brand, your email list, your influence around the idea. And then you use other mediums like you speaking, get on podcasts, do blogging. A lot of these things contribute to one, influence as an author, but influence as you as a brand, with a book being one of your products. So there's a lot that goes into it, and you have to choose what works for you.
Yeah, and I think, what a lot of people forget is sort of human psychology, that, oh, you've written a book. It completely, correct me if I'm wrong, Lee, you've probably felt the same, but even today, even in the day of, millennials and Gen Z, even my kids, talk about my books, right? Like, their friends like, oh, your dad's a published author. He's famous,
Yeah.
these fourth graders. So it really is evergreen that you have something published, therefore you're perceived as an expert. And it's funny with social media, and when I work with businesses, and my advice to all my clients is, if you were to have a targeted approach, right? If you were to, and it's funny, on my blog today, in fact, I should read this to you, and I think I will. And this is just an example. Bear with me here while I find the comments. Let me read this to you, because this speaks to a lot of what a book is about and why you yield influence. And this was a comment, and you can actually see it on my blog post, The Definitive Guide to Instagram Affiliate Marketing. And so a friend of mine has an Instagram account where she posts pictures related to architecture. The pics she posts are all selected from different websites, i.e. none of the pictures are hers. This is an example of curated content, right? And I have seen people write books purely of interviews with other people. I don't know if that's right for everybody, but it has been done, right, Lee, where you ask for submissions from experts. So it's the same concept, or on Twitter, of just sharing other people's content, right? She usually mentions the website where the picture came from, though she often doesn't know the name of the photographer. As the pictures are carefully selected, right, this is the value of content curation. But this is also the value you as an author bring when you have your own unique perspective to whatever angle you're covering about a different subject. She already has almost 300,000 followers, and she intends to monetize the profile by using some of the techniques you guys teach. Now, the question was about copyrights. What are the precautions she should take? And my response was simply, please, hire a lawyer to answer those questions for you. But that is an example, right, of someone who had a very targeted approach of sharing content or publishing content about a very, very specific subject matter, a niche, as we like to call it. And from that, they were able to yield influence, build a community, get more views, because they were perceived as an expert on the subject. If you were to, I'm going to throw this out there, if you were to write a book on something, you would be perceived as an expert on that. Now, this is my own story. Lee, you'll remember we started talking, and it's like, hey, Neil, you have any book ideas? I'm like, well, I got a few book ideas, right? I always have book ideas, because I have this, for those that know me, I have this unfinished Twitter book, which I still have. So I have this Twitter book. I want to write a new LinkedIn book, which is going to be more about the social selling side of LinkedIn, sort of a revision of another book that I wrote back in the day. And then I have the topic of influencer marketing. There's also the topic of employee advocacy that I still think is a great book to be written about. And Lee, we agreed, let's go for influencer marketing. I thought that would be the most relevant as well. So, I wasn't an expert per se. There are people that have been blogging about influencer marketing for several years. There are books that have been written about influencers. Sure, I had been hired as an influencer. My agency worked with influencers, but it wasn't, I hadn't really written much content about it, other than the work I did for my clients, as well as how I taught it to executives at universities that I teach at. So, but I threw the idea out there, right? And this is what Publisher was great for. Obviously, I hope that everybody who looks at Publisher, let's put the URL up there again, would actually want to go through the process and complete it and write a book. But, my book, The Business of Influence, which would be called The Age of Influence when published, was really about a test market of an idea. Would people be interested if I wrote this book? But as I threw it out there and as I promoted it, people started to see me as an expert in the space, right? This is human nature. The same reason why that architecture, profile on Instagram has 300,000 viewers, or other people have been able to create, and my clients have been able to create communities from just publishing content about a specific niche or subject. It is the same concept. So now I'm speaking about influencer marketing. I'm being asked, pretty famous publications in the space for my advice on influencer marketing. Obviously, as you write the book and do more research for your knowledge gaps, you do become an expert. I mean, you focus on one subject. That's really what expertise is all about. Right. So Lee, maybe that's just my experience, but I'm assuming that that's relatable, especially for nonfiction, for a lot of other authors. Are there any authors you work with, Lee, that have similar stories, or or any other perspectives that you can discuss here?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you hit on a lot of stuff right there, but I think the biggest thing is it's choosing something that you want to be an expert on, because if the book is successful, that is what you're going to be known for. And then the big one is consistency, right? You choose something that, if someone is like, people are talking about influence and social media and stuff like this, but if you're consistent with it and you build a community, that's when you start developing the expertise and people want more of that content. So it makes it difficult, to write your book on Twitter, or it makes it difficult to write on something else. So you got to kind of go with the wave of influence sometimes. And, that's half of what being a thought leader is asking yourself what topic or area of expertise that you want to be known for, that you think you can provide value to, and then start sharing content and information to people who are looking for that expertise. Gain clients and partners and endorsers in that same space. You build a community, you build a following, email list, a platform, whatever you want to call it. And then you create a book around that. And it has to be for your readers. It has to be for your community. You have to make the book about them. You do not make the book about you, for instance. Neil, this is not a book about Neil Schaefer. It's a book about how people can build influence, right?
Right.
That's not how you build influence in leadership usually, unless you have 1 million followers and, you're famous on TV. People don't want to hear about you per se. They want to hear from you and what you can do for them. So that is the best way to, I guess, develop a book content. And, yeah, like you said, a lot of the authors that I work with kind of had this good idea. They had a line to what they want to become an expert in, and then they use everything that they've already been working on. For instance, we work with a lot of commercial nonfiction, of course, speakers, coaches, people who run retreats, people who are doing client consulting services, who have an expertise, or people that are, founders in a really niche area, or they're a nutritionist, or they're in health, but they have a unique methodology. So being able to bring these into, validation. You mentioned validation as well. So, you can offer coaching packages or workshops to sell your book, or to get people interested in your book, or vice versa. I know I've worked with somebody that was a chef, and they offered cooking classes or products like aprons or partner products in order for people to buy their book, join their community, and they push out more information. I've worked with podcasters who offer special guest spots. I've worked with screenwriters who offered writing lessons. Tons of unique things that people can do to build your brand, utilize it to sell your books. And then the last point that you made, Neil, was pretty important. And it's really about validation. So, a lot of times authors spend 3 to 6 months on writing their book, and they say, this is such a great idea, I have a full manuscript, and then they go try to sell it, or then they go try to pitch it to an agent or a publisher, and it gets rejected. That doesn't really work very well. You typically get rejected, or for some reason it's not connecting. So sell your book, utilize these things, validate this message before you take time creating this huge piece of content. It's a really lean method for getting a book out there, and that's really, again, the basis for what Publishizer does. These pre-order campaigns. Yeah, Neil, exactly. You went through all this stuff, but yeah.
And 2 points I wanted to make based on what you were saying. Number one is that at the end of the day, like I talk about, LinkedIn profiles are not about your past, but about the future you want to create. It's an inbound marketing tool, right? So in a similar way, your book becomes an inbound marketing tool. Where is it that you want to go? So if there is something you want to sell, your book should be obviously related to that. So, a great case in point, on my previous podcast episode, I had a gentleman named Adrian Salumanovic, and hope I'm pronouncing his name right. Adrian, don't know if you're listening, but Adrian had, he was basically a startup investor. He had successfully launched a few companies. And what he ended up doing was he did a lot regarding PR. He was able to get a lot of free PR. And so he decided, you know what, I'm gonna write a book, and I'm gonna create a program that's gonna help small business owners and entrepreneurs get free PR like I did. It's a perfect example. So he wrote the book called Free PR. And if you go to freeprbook.com, you'll see that he actually has a program. He offers consulting. So it's all related around the book. And this is why I think, if you want to write a fiction book, go for it. I don't know how it's going to help you yield influence for your professional career, though, right? It might help differentiate you. It might be an interesting, ice-breaking conversation topic at a party. But it's really that nonfiction. It's really thinking, okay, if I had a book out on this subject, what would it do for my career? What would I do? What would it do for my business? My thing with influencer marketing is I always create content. I'm a little bit unique, but I create content based on customer demand. And I realized that influencer marketing was the single biggest area that I was getting the most questions on, yet the least number of good answers, or answers that I would think were good, really existed in the market. And it's similar with why I wrote Maximize Your Social 6 years ago. It was all about social media strategy, social media ROI. That was the number one question I got. It just wasn't clear until I wrote that book, and then it became clear. So I'm hoping with influencer marketing, the age of influence, it becomes the same way. But you got to think of the book as the vehicle. Where do you want it to take you? And at the end of the day, what are you going to offer when people buy the book and they want a piece of you? They want to hear more from you. They want to get more advice from you. How are you going to deliver on that? And that's something I think that's critical to think of beforehand. But the other part is it is the vehicle. So even if you do a test market, and you were saying you write a manuscript and then you get rejected, at the least, right, if you test market this and if you promote it and if you don't get whatever book sales you were looking for, you will have created some great content. You will have probably made new connections. You would have deepened connections with your community. So there's no bad to it. And in fact, in doing so, you're going to learn a lot about the subject and a lot about yourself. And it's like every entrepreneur will tell you, you fall down 9 times and the 10th you're successful. Gary Vaynerchuk saying, I fucking hate losing. I love losing. Sorry. I love to fucking lose, right? It's the same thing. With every failure, you get that much closer to success. And I think every entrepreneur will tell you that. But any other advice on top of that, Lee?
Yeah, it's content, right? I mean, you're always testing things out. Even if you have no intention of writing a book, you're pushing content out, and you're basically you're validating that this content is going to resonate, it's going to be received well. I mean, I remember it was more common, I guess, maybe 10 years ago. It's not as common anymore, but blogging was huge, right? And not only that, people started getting a lot of traffic and millions of followers, and people write books based on the traffic of their followers, and publishers will offer book deals and stuff like that. Dave Kerpen, tons of traffic and likes on his LinkedIn articles. He just put them together into a book, and it sold like crazy. Mark Manson, 1 million subscribers, turned it into a book. I think he was top of the charts for like really long. So that is a common way to test it out and then turn it into a book later. Usually these days, I think it's done all the way around. You want to write a book on it. You're testing some things out, but you don't get massive subscribers. And that's just one medium. So like if you're doing speaking, for instance, if you can get speaking gigs, that's great. You get in front of a lot of people. And if you're lucky, maybe half the people like what you have to say and then follow you. And if you're lucky, if you start doing podcasting and blogging, if you're lucky, 10% of them like you. And then you can sell them your book and all this stuff. So you basically start gaining percentages of people that like what you have to say and then say more of that. And I think that's just the starting of how you not only build a book, but how you start building your personal brand, your leadership, your influence. All these things are always working together at all times.
Yeah. And, we didn't really cover that concept of influencer or influence in more detail. But, if you want to yield more influence, if you think, why are people listening to this person? They should be listening to me. You obviously need content. You have to have something to say, and you need to get out there, and you really do need to build that community. I mean, Dave Kerpen's able to do that because he has this huge community, right? And Gary Vaynerchuk as well. He could write a book every year, and he'd sell a million copies of each book, I'm sure. So, and what's interesting is that the paradigm shift with publishers marketing your book to publishers being more of distributors and facilitators. And at the end of the day, it's really up to you as a new author to market your own book. And I think this is probably universal at this point, right? So even if you're working with a publisher, you still sort of have to have that mentality that you're a self-published author. You need to market the heck out of your book. You need to be your best advocate in anything in life. So, and that's going to start with having that community. So you do definitely, if you really want to be successful with this, you could create a community from the book. It'll take a little bit longer, but ideally, I think, Lee, and you probably have the same opinion of this, when publishers are looking to work with authors. So to explain the publishizer process, you put together a book plan, you then upload it, and you accept pre-orders for your book. And you can be, my book was 25% done when I started my publishizer campaign. And in full transparency, right? You put the information up, you throw it out there, and you see what sort of interest your community might have in buying that book, right? So, but when publishers start reaching out to you, they're going to be looking at, how much traffic does your blog get? How many followers do you have on Twitter? How many followers do you have on, LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram? How many times do you speak publicly throughout the year? Because speaking is a great way to push books in quantity. Even if the organizer doesn't want to buy your books, just having your books there and being able to sell 5, 10, 25 copies, whatever it is, right? So that's why if you really want to be successful at this and you want to become an influencer either way, you really do need to build that platform. You need to find your niche, which is going to be based on your experience ideally and your passion. And you need to start creating content, and that content, and I don't know if Dave Kerpen actually went through and analyzed his LinkedIn posts, which ones did better or worse. But as you have content, you begin to get data, right? What is my community interested in? What is a hot topic just based on number of comments or shares or your Google Analytics, how much traffic you got. And then from there, you slowly begin to build this community as you begin to become a more active publisher of content. And it's just a matter of, writing the book is just an extension of that. And I think it's an important step that a lot of people miss. Lee, I mean, I've talked to other authors in the publishizer, community, people that they're top of their game professionally, and they're like, I'm going to write a book, and they just never build a platform. And I think that platform, and it's obviously the word of Michael Hyatt, that's a great book, but I think that every author, every professional, I think really needs that to support them, whether it's just 200 or 300 LinkedIn connections that can help you find your next job, or friends on Instagram that are going to like up your posts. We all need to have that support here, today in social media.
Yeah, I mean, the P word, the platform word, I mean, that gets tossed around with books a lot, just because that's one of the things that publishers love to have in order to sell a book, and that's what sells books. But platform is super important to have, even if you don't write a book, because this is basically how you build your business, or how you're building your community, or how you're building your brand. So these things that publishers look for with the platform are, your Instagram followers, or your Twitter followers, or followers are a big thing, or your email list, or your page views, like you said, or your blog followers. All this stuff is important because it's indicators. It's indicators when referring to a book. It's indicators that you can, you can talk to consumers and your followers in a way that gets them to engage with you and to possibly sell your book later on. So I guess knowing that you need to do the marketing for your own book is one thing, but knowing how is like a completely different story. It takes strategy, it takes commitment to build a platform to market your book, and that is always, like you said, it's the responsibility of the author. Authors should know that they need to sell their books. They are committed to their own success. No one's going to sell your book for you. And then when I say these indicators, like 20,000 followers on Twitter, yes, it looks very nice, but social media isn't always the strongest platform to sell your book. It's just an indicator that you can develop relationships to sell that book to, in another format, like maybe an email or through a personal message. Like, that's how you get stuff done. That's how you build a platform for real. And that's how you sell books. These other things, these platforms, again, just indicators of the strength of your relationships.
Yeah, and that's really a great point. As an author, or as an influencer, and I really see being an author as a type of influencer. But it's funny. I'm about to record a podcast episode about Pinterest, and you have all these people on Instagram that yield a lot of influence. But at the end of the day, what businesses want when working with influencers, like what publishers want when working with authors, is they want sales, they want conversions, they don't want likes, they don't want comments, right? They want to see people that actually buy stuff. And Instagram as an e-commerce platform is still a little bit limiting, but you have other platforms like Pinterest that probably, if you're an Instagram influencer talking about certain subjects, those subjects probably do really, really well on Pinterest, and people buy by clicking from Pinterest to a site. So why aren't more influencers on Pinterest? But let's take a step back even further. Why don't a lot of these influencers have their own website? So this, to me, when writing my book, I just feel there's a lot of fake influence out there. buying a fake followers, buying a fake engagement. And when I see an influencer that doesn't even have their own website, it really, makes me question their credibility. Did they just pop up on Instagram, buy fake followers and fake engagement so it looks like an influencer, right? So I think the website serves a lot of different issues, but it's really the email list that is also that other critical component. Social comes and goes. The social networks control the algorithms. You may be getting a lot of likes on Instagram today. There's no guarantee that happens tomorrow. But really the website where you bring people back into your brand and your home, and then obviously your email list where you can stay in better touch with people. These are the things, the other two pieces outside of social, and probably the two most important pieces that are going to help you sell your book and, believe it or not, help you yield influence. Because, at the end of yielding the influence, if you want to work with businesses as an influencer, or if you want to sell more books, you need to be able to contact people. And you can't send direct messages to all 100,000 of your Instagram followers or all of your 30,000 LinkedIn connections. I mean, you can one at a time. And that's really where that email list and the website and staying in better touch with people. And, if you're not on social, you're not searching the web, you're reading email, even today, even younger generations. So that's always been my advice. And yeah, you're right, Lee. It's not just about social. Social does not necessarily convert that well. But either way, you really need to have a community, no matter where they are in what medium. But I would recommend, if you're writing a book and you have content, you could be, blogging teasers of that content, from your website. And obviously sharing it over email to those that may want an update on it. Because, if you send out something on LinkedIn or on Facebook or, whatever platform, only X% of your community are ever going to see that post anyway, right? So a lot of things to consider. I don't want to overwhelm our listeners and our viewers that of all the stuff they have to do. But if you really want to go about it the right way, that would definitely be the recommendation there. And I think that obviously publishers really look at websites and they really want to know, hey, what sort of email list do you have? It's probably something that's going to come up in negotiations, I assume.
At some point.
All right. So, we've covered a lot of ground. Let's get to, finding a publisher for your book. So, and let me take one step back because this is advice. I get asked about this a lot, Lee. So part of my interviewing you is also me having a place to provide my advice on the subject. But, if you want to write a book, okay, most books are and correct me if I'm wrong, Lee, 40 to 60,000 words. So let's just take 60,000 words. This is 5,000 words, 12 chapters. So if you can divide, what are the 12 main things you want to tell someone in a book or about your experience, whatever it is, 12 bullet points, right? Underneath those bullet points, based on those things you want to talk about, what are the 3 important things to consider when talking about those points? So you have 12 bullet points, you have 3 sub bullet points for each chapter, and you're looking at creating 4,000 to 5,000 words or even 3,500 to 5,000 words per chapter. And that's how you divide and conquer. And if you have blog posts that fill in some of the subpoints, great. If not, you create new content. You block out a day a week, a few hours a week, a Sunday a week, whatever it is, and you do it. And this has always been my process. It's, it depends on different for different people. For me, it's been, 2 to 3 months. If I'm in the zone and I'm really focused, I'll be able to write that book. But it's not impossible. It's something that I think everybody can and should do. So, so you have the book idea. You upload it to Publishizer. Let's get the URL up there again. You're talking about it with your community. You're starting to gauge interest. You're seeing if people would spend $15, $20, $25 to actually pre-order a book that has yet to be finally written. And then once you're on Publishizer, you start to get a lot of emails from a lot of different people. Some are publishers. Many are publishers that you may have never heard of. There's also, hybrid publishers, there's self-publishers, there's vanity publishers. There's people that say, hey, I can help you with your editing. I can help you with ghostwriting. I can help you with, all of the graphical layout. I can help you design good book covers. I can help you with PR about your book. So, now in 2019, I don't want to age this podcast because this is really evergreen content, but you have a whole ecosystem of service providers. When I started self-publishing back in 2009, that just did not exist. But now, after a decade, it's easier than ever. But now, how do you go about? The real question is, how do you sort of navigate that and decide on the best way to find a publisher for your book? And we can talk about, furthermore, what sort of publisher should you work with? And Lee, I know that's your expertise. But, Lee, from my perspective, and I think you'd agree, if you're looking to get a publisher for your book, you're either going to self-publish And if you want to self-publish, go to Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing. Boom, you're self-published. It's not hard to do, right? Or you're going to go the ancient route of sort of, you know, working with an agent and writing a proposal and, you know, pitching it. Or you are going to independently reach out to publishers that may or may not know you, and, you know, try to find acquisition editors, and that's a really hard route to go. Or, you know, in the middle of this big space, that's where I see Publishizer, right? As why, you know, this is the inbound marketing way to publish your book in essence, because there's so many publishers now that Publishizer has gotten so big. So many publishers are monitoring and watching Publishizer and seeing how many pre-sales people get, seeing the interest. Whether you decide to self-publish or work with a major publisher with like HarperCollins, like I'm doing, it gives you the most flexibility to decide what you want to do with your book. And it gives you that exposure to publishers, so you don't necessarily have to work with an agent, although there might be instances where you want to, but you don't have to, and you may not have to go out and seek the advice of acquisition editors, because all these acquisition editors are actually coming out and talking to you. So Lee, would you agree that's sort of the landscape today of what's possible and that great niche that Publishizer fits?
Yeah, that was pretty great. Thanks, Neil. I would say just adding on top of that is, yeah, typical route to a publisher. If you're not going to go self-publishing, you're going to go to traditional, right? And the typical way to do that, yeah, is you want to seek an agent, or you just start querying these publishers directly, which requires a really great book idea. It requires a book proposal, because that's what they use to say yes or no, I don't want to work with you. What is super, I don't want to say depressing, but it's about 96% of every book proposal ever, and there are millions every single year that are getting rejected by agents, by publishers, for numerous reasons, which I can get into. But you know, a lot of times you need these indicators. You need these indicators that say, okay, beyond the idea and the proposal, can you as an author sell your book once I decide that this is a good path? So it takes a lot of prep work. You have to know what you have to do. And that's part of what Publishizer does as well. So agent is one. The second one is, yeah, you just build such a great influence, and you have publishers discovering you and asking you to publish without an agent. Better yet, you get two publishers to discover you, and you can choose the best one, right? Difficult, but rare, but this is happening quite often, or often enough. So yeah, Publishizer, how we fit into all of that is we're working with a lot of publishers, traditional and non-traditional, but no matter what, is you're going to start marketing your book. No, you're going to start selling your book when you're published, no matter what. Whether you self-publish, whether you go with a traditional or non-traditional publisher, Publishizer basically helps you form a good book idea. We have to write a great proposal that we think can sell to our partners at a traditional level, because you can always go with non-traditional no matter what. And then you're going to basically start selling your book ahead of time. So you're going to start reaching out to people to sell copies of your book, to basically validate that you can sell. And then this actually makes it a very strong sell for Publishizer to get you a deal. So in that fashion, we're acting as your agent, but we're not rejecting book ideas. We're helping you basically prove that you can bring traction to this book idea, because, you know, typical traditional agents reject books for many reasons. One is they simply don't like the book idea. Subjectively, they don't like the book idea, and they're going to reject a really great book idea. That author is going to get discouraged and go and self-publish. Second, they don't have the network behind them to publish your specific book, even though, again, it could over here get a really great publishing deal and get traction. But that agent just is going to reject it outright. Again, you get discouraged and go and self-publish. So we kind of take a different trajectory besides rejecting authors and saying, let's help you prove that this book is worthy. And then no matter what, if we don't get you a big deal, there's all these other types of really fast-growing independent publishers who can help get your book out there further. So that's really, you know, how we decide to value Publishizer as a platform and help a lot of authors, from first-time authors, fiction authors, to established commercial business authors. It's a wide range of authors, and publishers are always looking at the platform.
Yeah, really, I know that, you know, we began this conversation. And by the way, for those of you that are viewing this podcast, feel free to drop any questions or comments you might have right there in Facebook comments. We can actually display them on the screen, and Lee and or myself will respond to them. But yeah, I think that, you know, the platform, we started with you describing Publishizer as an agency. I really consider Publishizer to be the Kickstarter for authors, right? And there really is no other platform like it. So, and I also want to remind people that want to write a book, Lee, maybe you know an updated figure. What is the average number of books that a self-published author sells? And I want to see if your number is the same as mine.
Yeah, I'm curious on this. It's always changing, but and this is such a common question, right? For me, and I just use Amazon. The average amount of books sold by the average self-published author, I have 250. Neil, I don't know what you have. I have 250.
Oh, I have 50 books is the number I heard. So in other words, right, most authors do not sell that much books. So that's the other thing is you get it up on Publishizer, you only sell 50 copies. You're already at the average, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because there's so many people, hey, I'll get it up on Amazon. It'll sell tons. Well, it doesn't work that way, right? You need to do the work and you need to have that community behind you. So, that's, like I said, for every aspiring author, you need to really go out there and engage and build that community, become an influencer in your industry. That's going to be a dedicated chapter in my upcoming book, The Age of Influence. And I also plan to start a mastermind. For those of you that pre-ordered through the Publishizer campaign, there was this mastermind for the business of influence, of how to yield more influence. And I think that's going to be critical, now and going forward. But, getting back to obviously using Publishizer and the other avenues that you can use to be able to decide, what type of publisher to work with or how to find publishers. Let's take a step back again. And Lee, can you sort of help me navigate or help our listeners navigate the landscape of the different types of publishers that exist? And I know that, on Publishizer, almost every type of this publisher exists and reach out to authors. But can you sort of talk about all the different publishing options that things like hybrid publishing and what have you?
Yeah, and hopefully my trusty AirPods are not going to go dead on me. Otherwise, I have to switch my audio. But
so far, so good.
It is, there's really, if you're not going to self-publish and you choose to go towards like a more traditional path and get a publisher, there's really two options that you have. One is a traditional publisher and the other is a non-traditional. So traditional is like the big five, like Penguin, HarperCollins, all the big groups out there that have a lot of distribution. Also in traditional is fast-growing independents. They're not a part of these big five groups that you typically know about. Really great value to authors. They do high-level editing. They do big pad advances, and they get you into distribution into retail bookstores. That's what you want as an author. That's kind of an ideal scenario. The non-traditional is hybrid publishers. There's usually a small upfront cost, or there's a purchase requirement, but they will still publish your book, get your book out there further. They're going to help you sell more than 50 copies. So it is a better option, and you have the support that you wouldn't have on your own. And then you have some service publishers, people who are just doing, pay me a service fee and I'll publish your book. So there's a lot of varying degrees of publishers and what they bring to the table. But it depends on a couple main factors in terms of which ones you can work with. It's quality of idea. It's these indicators that you have an author. Platform is always something they ask for, but it's not always a deal breaker, right? If HarperCollins is going to offer a publishing deal for anyone that has 10K followers, in the book is super important, but sometimes the book idea trumps followers. If you have 200 people in an email contact, but your book idea is amazing and you're showing potential to grow yourself, there's a book deal in play for you. So this is why Publishizer is able to get so many different types of publishing deals instead of an agent only going after deals that can get a high paid advance. So don't discount any type of publishing deal. Anytime you can get someone to support your book, partner with you, get this thing out there in a way that you necessarily can't do on your own, it's really big added value. And there are tons of details that there's too many details in publishing to go over, but at a broad, high level, I think this is, it's good to know.
Yeah, and I think it's going to come down to, do you want to self-publish or do you want to work with a publisher? Now, I've done both. My first two books self-published, my last one with Wiley and this next one with HarperCollins. So two of those, big five or big seven, however you want to count them, big publishers I work with.
They're traditional, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's, for me, I like the idea of partnering. I like the idea of having alliances. And I see a publisher as a partner. I don't see a publisher as someone that's going to do anything and everything for me, but it leaves the questions out of the process. Is this editor the right person to be working with? Should I hire a separate proofreader? should the colors of my design, is this really going to sell? Because obviously book cover design is very important as well. It just, I'd rather work with a team of experts and share the profits with them so that I can focus on the content and the promotion. Now that's me. Everyone's going to be different, but that's why even if I wasn't able to work with a traditional publisher and it was a non-traditional independent type of publisher that is not as well known, maybe not have as good of a distribution, at the least, what those publishers should help you work with is editing, obviously, copy editing, hopefully some development editing, proofreading, book cover design, the graphic layout, the distribution, and there's obviously going to be some promotion that's going to depend on the publisher. But I mean, that's a lot of work, right? And that requires money. So even if you want to do it yourself, you're still going to be project managing someone, and you're always going to be wondering, is that the right quality? Where when you work with a publisher, all those people that provide the services are vetted. So that's why I prefer the publisher route. And some of you, I've told the story, this conversation I had with Mark Schaefer, another of the social media Schaefers. We're not related, by the way, but we call each other cousin in social media. And he's a prolific author who went from McGraw-Hill and now is self-published. And he is a big fan and proponent of self-publishing. So, but he already has his editor and everybody all lined up. And I don't know how long it took him to get that to be lined up, but that definitely is an option. But the beautiful thing about Publishizer is, regardless of the option, the vehicle to get the word out about your book, to get exposure, and to begin to easily accept pre-orders without having to do any web coding, right? It's all right there. And that's really the main message I want to tell people. And, I'm going to be referring a lot of people to this podcast because of all the questions I get asked. So I just want to make sure I do a brain dump of all this information and all this advice, right, Lee? So, we covered a lot. If our listeners have any questions, this is really the time to ask them. Just pop them into the comments. But even if you don't have any questions, Lee, any sort of final thoughts you have on the subject? I think we really did cover a lot. But Lee, I know at the beginning we were talking about doing in a webinar format. And it's funny because on my blog, one of my contributors just published a blog post, why live streams are the new webinars. So is there anything that you wanted me to provide Publishizer authors that you can refer them to this podcast where they can sort of tap into my experience and I can help them? Let's take that angle to end our podcast if we don't get any more questions.
Yeah, for sure. Really great takeaway before my headphones are popping out here. Sorry about that, But I think the biggest question authors has is around marketing. I mean, once authors are sold on a traditional publisher, they understand the benefits of distribution and credibility. It's really okay, no matter what, I have to sell my book. And, you sold your book, you've gotten deals. I guess what's a really great takeaway for Publishizer authors, seeing a successful author sell your book, do the things that we mentioned in the talk, gaining some influence, and landing that deal. I guess what would you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think we covered it all, but it really begins with, you need to have a digital presence. You need to have a digital footprint. So you need to have a website. I volunteer at my my elementary school son's PTA. I'm actually on the PTA board. And my role was, let me help you develop a new website because your website sucks. And there's a few other things we wanted to do. We wanted to have our own store where we could customize it a lot easier than the software that the national PTA gave us. So, I'm not a website developer by any means, but I was able to go on to Wix, Wix.com, and develop a really, really good looking website for them really, really easily. It does not, and it's domain name is $10 a year, and monthly on Wix is $10 a month. So you're looking at $130 investment. You can hire someone to do it for you if you have a few $100s or maybe $1,000 or $2,000, but it's something you can easily do yourself. But you need to have a digital footprint, and you need to start sharing content about your book or about what you want to write about. And you do that for a few reasons. Number one, this is the ultimate test market. Do I have content to write about? Will other people think this content is interesting? But the other thing is, if you want to build a community, you got to start somewhere. And obviously you have your own friends, and you'll share it with your own personal friends on Facebook or LinkedIn connections. You'll start to get feedback. But how do people find other people to follow in social media is based on content. They do content searches. They search hashtags on Instagram. They do content searches on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Pinterest, whatever it is. So you need to seed social media with content. And ideally, whether it's your content or it's curated content, we already talked about that Instagram photographer. Well, not a photographer, but a curator. So there's a role that curated content plays. you need to build a channel, a platform, whatever you want to call it. You really need to get out there. And even if it's just starting once a week or once a month, you need to start that process, because that's going to be, book sales do not happen magically. People buy from people they like, know, and trust. So this is the single most important thing you can do, is establish that digital presence, web, social. If you can create a very, very simple ebook, and here's a great resource for you. So obviously we have Publishizer, which you should all be checking out. I mentioned Wix, and I'm just going to put these URLs up there just in case you can't see what you can't visualize what that URL might look like. But the other one that I have become a big fan of is Fiverr. So with Fiverr, and it used to be something that people joked about, the idea that you do a gig for $5. So, hey, I just want to record a shout out that someone said Neal Schaffer is the greatest author in the world. So I can pay someone around the world $5. They'll record that audio and I can use it as a snippet in the podcast. That's sort of how Fiverr started. But now you have a lot of great service providers from around the world. You have you have people, from the US, but you have people around the world that basically for any marketing task you can think of, there is someone there that can help you. And I say that because if you wanted to just create an ebook, I have worked with someone to create an ebook on Fiverr, right? So I basically created a Word document, right? This is an image I want to use for the cover. Here's a Word document. Here's some illustrations I want to put in there. Create a good looking ebook that'll be in a PDF. That is something that can be done. Does not have to cost a lot of money. But once you have, it's called a lead magnet in marketing terms. Once you have something that is of value to people, that people would want to download, it gives you something to promote in social media, but it also gives you the ability to begin to acquire email addresses. They don't just come, from nowhere. So that's really, the minimum. I know it sounds like a lot of work, and hopefully, if you're interested, reach out to me. I'll put my own website information there, just in case you're viewing this. I'm going to be putting together a program where I'm going to help people do this. It's not necessarily geared towards authors, but towards small businesses and marketers. But I do think that's really what is necessary, and that's the biggest piece of advice. That's going to be the best market for you, because everybody is in social media now, and we use it for a lot of different reasons. But there are a lot of people who use social media for inspiration, for finding information, for learning, for so many different things, both personally and professionally. And that's where, if you are an author, you should be playing that role and filling that gap, that vacuum, and providing yourself. But you need to be there, right? What was it? Wayne Gretzky, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And one of my all-time favorite quotes. And, another one, Woody Allen, 80% of success is showing up, right? So either you're showing up in social or you're not. And if you're not showing up, other people are being listened to and other people's books are being bought. So it's muscle memory, right? All of this is muscle memory. Writing a book is muscle memory. Building that platform, that community is muscle memory. Requires a daily commitment. You need to put together a playbook, and you spend 5 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day. I really want you to focus on your content, developing that book and blog content. But if that's the investment you want to make, it's a lifetime investment, and you're going to meet the most wonderful people in the world that are going to help you in ways you never thought.
Perfect. Yeah, that's super valuable. Thanks so much.
Hey, you're
great.
very welcome. Yeah, and I mean all of our answers tend to be very long, because it's not a simple right. It's not a simple cookie cutter approach here, obviously. So once again, for those of you that are viewing the live stream, if you have any questions, this is your last chance. Before we drop off, Lee, I want to thank you once again. You've been talking to or listening to Lee Constantine and Neal Schaffer. And let's just put up the Publishizer website once more for those of you that are viewing this, whether it's on the live stream or in the future on YouTube. So there you go, publishizer.com. Definitely check that out. Lee, any last minute thoughts, or did we cover everything that we promised our readers and ourselves we would?
I think we covered a lot. We covered a lot of good stuff. So Neal, thanks so much for having me on. Super nice catching up with you. It's always super nice. So thanks so much.
Hey, Lee, thank you. It's been awesome. I hope that this, and if you're just joining us, I hope you'll go back and, the replay will be posted, obviously, and you'll be able to hear it on the Maximize Your Social podcast and see it on YouTube. But I do hope that, you go back and listen from the beginning. If you ever thought about writing a book or becoming an influencer, or are just curious, this 1 hour podcast, live stream video will answer all those questions. So Lee, thank you so much. Big fan of Publishizer. Can't wait to get my book published and get that case study of successful authors that have worked with Publishizer. I'm a fan, and I've supported a few of the Publishizer authors as well. So even if you don't want to write a book yet, go out to publishizer.com, check out some of the books that are accepting pre-orders. You may find a great book or two, and reach out to the authors and start a conversation, because they can offer you advice as well, right, Lee? We didn't even cover that entire community aspect of Publishizer, but something you want to say about that?
Yeah, for sure. Books for pre-order all the time up at Publishizer, brand new book ideas, amazing new authors, and you find books like Neil's and tons of other influencers and people doing awesome things. So nice plug, Neil. Thanks for that.
Hey, it's not about plugging. It's all about sharing the love, and I'm a sincere, honest, true fan. So Lee, thanks again. We've never met in person, just on video. It feels like I've known you like you're a brother. But hopefully at some point our paths will cross. And everybody, I thank you for tuning in, for listening to this podcast. Please feel free to any follow-up. Please feel free to reach out to either me or Lee at Publishizer, and hope this podcast provided you a lot of value. So we're going to sign off here. Lee, where are you chiming in from today?
Amsterdam, Netherlands today.
So Lee is in the Netherlands, one of my favorite countries in the world. Amsterdam, one of my favorite cities. I'm here at my home office in Irvine, California, behind the Orange Curtain in Orange County. So from Amsterdam, from Orange County, signing off here, wishing you all a great social day. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, Neil.
Thanks, Lee.